Hello everyone, my name's Peter. Welcome to my Game Week 9 Transfer Targets video. I delayed it a day to allow all of the Champions League matches to take place, as we were hoping for some premium midfielder news which might really influence our decisions, and we certainly got it. If you enjoyed the video, please do hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's get into it. Let's start in an obvious place by talking about Bukayo Saka. He was a hot topic last week, and he is again after failing to make the squad at all for the Bournemouth game. We've heard a few conflicting reports about Saka's fitness recently. Likazi told us it was a minor injury and he might have been in contention to play in England's second game a week and a half ago. And then Mikel Arteta told us he might make the Bournemouth game in game week 8. That clearly wasn't the case, and he was also unavailable for the Champions League match at home to Shakhtar on Tuesday. Arteta has most recently told us that Saka hasn't trained at all since he originally got the injury on his hamstring. Now that doesn't really sound very promising as far as him making the squad for the match against Liverpool this weekend. Now maybe he will. Arteta will be desperate to have him back. They just aren't the same attacking unit without him, but it's definitely not certain he'll play. So I'm thinking pretty much the same thing I thought last week. Saka really needs to be moved on. We can't afford to have a £10 million player on our bench not knowing if he's going to play. And especially now we have some good options to replace him with. Son returned from injury in Spurs' demolition of West Ham last week and scored in his first game back. He looked sharp and he got into plenty of attacking areas, especially more centrally, which have been a bit of a worry recently as he's often played very wide on some occasions this season. We did hear from Ange Postecoglou that San had been left a little bit sore after the West Ham game, and that he wouldn't make the Europa League squad this week. However, he also added that he had intended to rest Son in that game anyway. Either way, a little bit sore doesn't sound serious enough for him to miss the next league game against Palace. I suspect he'll probably be fine for the decent run of fixtures that they've got coming up. A lot of people have discussed the possibility of bringing him in to replace Saka for the next 3 weeks, and then moving on to Parma in game week 12. If you haven't got any other particular issues in your team to sort out in the next few weeks, that feels like a pretty decent strategy. With Ipswich and Palace being particularly good teams to target, plus Villa playing a high line which Son can often thrive against, it's a 3-week run that's great for him. Son isn't the only differential option for the next 3 weeks though. Phil Foden was given the Man of the Match award in Manchester City's 5-0 Champions League victory over Sparta Prague yesterday. After being benched against Wolves in game week 8, and then seeing him play the full 90 minutes against Sparta, I figured he will probably be too risky a pick for the excellent Southampton fixture. But quotes from Guardiola have totally changed my opinion on that. It turns out that both Jeremy Doku and Jack Grealish were injured after the Wolves game. Grealish apparently for 7 to 10 days, and Doku for longer than that. That will take them both out of contention for the Southampton game and really open up the minutes possibility for Phil Foden. I know I was convinced he'd start against Wolves last week, and that obviously didn't turn out to be the case. But with the lack of options for City in midfield suddenly, and after his great performance in midweek, the odds on him starting have to be really high now. We know Pep loves to surprise us, but I've gone from feeling worried about owning him to feeling very excited about it. It's such a great fixture for City. He could really smash it. The following 2 games against Bournemouth and Brighton are perfectly reasonable for Foden as well. City can get at all those teams. Come game week 12 though, just like if you went for Son, I'd look to move him on and bring in Cole Palmer. Game weeks 12 to 14 are against much tougher defences for City. Yes, they can easily score in those games, but the potential returns just aren't going to be as good. If you haven't got lots of free transfers and you know you've got moves that you want to make in the next few weeks, it's perfectly reasonable to go straight to Cole Palmer this week and not take a punt on a Son or a Foden from game weeks 9 to 11. You are going to want Palmer in week 12 when Chelsea play Leicester. It's the first match of a wonderful run for Chelsea, which also includes Southampton in game week 14. Palmer's fixtures in game weeks 9 and 10, home to Newcastle and away to Manchester United, are perfectly reasonable. Chelsea are an attacking team who can easily score in these games, and Palmer is usually involved when they do. Game week 11, home to Arsenal, is a tough one for him, so it's not a perfect run, and I'm personally happy to avoid him until week 12. He's an absolute must-have at that point for me though. Whether you want to wait until game week 12 for Palmer and go with a differential like Son or Foden for the next 3 weeks first, or whether you'd rather just get Palmer in now, is totally team dependent. I'd definitely move Saka out for one of them though. I'm slightly more in favour of Foden than Son. As you can see, that's the choice I made last week, but they're both great picks. Do make sure you have a plan for Palmer when you need him though. William Saliba was sent off in his last match away to Bournemouth and will now be suspended for the home game against Liverpool in game week 9. As such, he's been transferred out by 500,000 managers already this week. Obviously, nobody should be looking to transfer him in due to that suspension. The question is, for managers who do own him, should we look to keep him or move him on? Well, let's start with the Arsenal defence on the whole. They started the season very well, keeping 3 clean sheets in the first 4 games against Wolves, Villa and Spurs. It's been quite a different story since then though. With many managers wildcarding around game week 6, doubling up on the Arsenal defence became a really popular move, and Saliba became a key transfer in. But the so-called easy fixtures at home to Leicester and Southampton didn't yield any clean sheets. And after Saliba got sent off against Bournemouth in week 8, Arsenal conceded another 2 goals. So, is the Arsenal defence really weaker than last season when it was the best in the league? Well, last season they conceded 29 goals, kept 18 clean sheets, and they averaged only 0.75 expected goals against them per 90 minutes. That's exceptional. But this season, after 8 games, that figure has risen to 1.16. It's still an impressive number, but it's 50% higher than last year. So, Arsenal aren't the best defensive team this season. That accolade goes to Liverpool, who have currently been a cut above everybody else. It's still good enough, though, for us to anticipate them doing well, and when you watch them, they do look sound defensively. The upcoming fixtures for Arsenal aren't as good as the ones we've just had, though. Liverpool at home, followed by Newcastle and then Chelsea, is not easy from a defensive perspective. After that, it appears to get better, but we have seen Forest cause problems to the so-called big sides this year, and teams like West Ham and Manchester United appear better at scoring goals than keeping them out. So this could be an opportunity to sell Saliba, but at the same time, it's definitely not an essential move. Arsenal could pick up a couple of clean sheets in the next 6 games, and if you've got cover for Saliba this week, then it's only the 1 week he's out for, and that's the Liverpool match. He'll be back in game week 10. There also aren't really that many good options around his price point to move to at this time. There's Gvardiol. City play Southampton at home this week, that's great, but then the fixtures get more tricky, so it doesn't really feel like the right time to move for him. Liverpool have a trickier run now until game week 15, and moving Saliba out for someone like a Robertson or a Van Dijk seems a bit of a sideways move in truth. Spurs fixtures are decent, and Porro may have been a great attacking defender for them last season, but he hasn't been showing quite so much threat this year. Perhaps the Spurs have tried to be a touch less cavalier. He's also not taking so many set pieces, so there's a loss there to his potential assists. So perhaps keeping Saliba, if we have cover this week, is the best option. If we can't field a full 11 though, maybe a downgrade is the next best option, and investing the extra funds into attacking areas of our team. So who might we move to in that circumstance? I briefly mentioned Josko Gvardiol, who scored 2 goals in his last 3 games, and he's got 250,000 new owners. City have struggled even more than Arsenal for clean sheets this season, not managing any since their opening match against Chelsea. So Gvardiol's returns have come from his goal-scoring exploits alone, but unlike last season, he hasn't been getting into attacking areas especially often. He's taken his chances very well, and does appear to have an eye for goal, but expected goals of 0.05? It's pretty low, and I wouldn't expect him to go on a run of goal scoring like he did towards the end of last year. I'd like a little more threat from a 6.1 million defender, or a better fixture run, and although Southampton at home is excellent, Brighton, Spurs and Liverpool in the next 5, they're all teams with a good goal scoring threat. He doesn't exactly shout clean sheets are coming to me. With Gvardiol, I'll be waiting until at least game week 14 before really looking at him as an option. On the cheaper side, we have Michael Keane. He had a great game in week 8, smashing an Everton second goal to go with his clean sheet. That's 20 points in 2 weeks for a 4.2 million player. But I think Keane's position in the team is massively at risk. Jarrad Branthwaite was an absolute rock at the back for Everton last season. He missed most of this one, but the first week he was available after injury, he was straight back into the team at home to Crystal Palace in game week 6, and that was at the expense of Keane. Now, Branthwaite may have missed game week 7 and 8 with a minor injury, allowing Keane back into the team, but you've got to imagine that's what will happen once again when Branthwaite is fit, which could be as early as game week 9, and certainly looks to be soon. Keane has to be a big fat avoid for me. He'll just end up being a problem sooner rather than later. I'd understand if you wanted to consider an alternative Everton defender though, after their defensive improvement recently and their nice run of fixtures for the next 6 weeks. Mykolenko, at 4.3 million, is the cheapest who's a regular first team player, so he's the direction I'd go in. He's had a couple of niggling injuries this season, but even so, he's been straight back in the team every time he's been available. Everton haven't exactly got a lot of options at left back, so he's pretty much nailed there when he's fit. He hasn't offered much attacking threat this season. Everton aren't exactly renowned for their fullbacks bombing on. He did manage 2 goals and an assist last year, but 0.03 expected assists per 90 and 0 expected goals so far tell us attacking returns are few and far between. He does grab the odd bonus point here and there, with Everton being somewhat better at keeping clean sheets than scoring lots of goals, but at 4.3 million, a few clean sheets in the next fixtures would be a splendid return. That makes me like him as an option for this week. Another option is Ryan Ait-Nouri, a player who's been coming up in conversation a lot lately. He's only 4.4 million and has 2 goals and 2 assists in a Wolves team that have really struggled this season and are yet to win. They've had some pretty tough fixtures so far, playing the current top 4 of Arsenal, Manchester City, Liverpool, Villa, as well as Chelsea, Newcastle, Brentford and a tough Forest side. This week, they have Brighton away, which is another difficult game in my opinion, but after that, their run they go on is fantastic. Game weeks 10 to 17 is 8 games against teams all in the bottom half of the table. Ait-Nouri's expected goals and assists are very reasonable for a budget price defender, and if Wolves continue with their wing-back system, I'm sure the attacking returns will come during that time. The real question is, can Wolves' defence improve? They'll obviously find it easier against weaker opposition, but they've been playing such open football so far, it's by no means certain that clean sheets are coming. I suspect, with the level of opposition they're facing, they're going to grab a few, but I don't imagine it'll happen consistently. But that's probably enough. A few clean sheets and a few attacking returns in 8 weeks? For 4.4 million, that would be fantastic. I'm almost talking myself into getting him. If he was a downgrade from Saliba, then the Brighton game this week away isn't great, but I'd put up with playing him in that one for the 8 that follow. Otherwise, there really is no rush to get him in this week. It's game week 10 at home to Palace when his best fixtures start. Brentford offer another route into a cheap defence with great fixtures. Ethan Pinnock and Nathan Collins are 4.5 million each, and both offer decent goal threat from set pieces. The next 5 games are excellent for them, starting and finishing with home games against promoted sides Ipswich and Leicester City. Like Wolves though, Brentford have not shown the greatest ability to defend well this season. Aside from the 3 promoted teams, Wolves and Brentford have the worst expected goals conceded in the league. But like Wolves, Brentford have also had a pretty tough start to the season. Liverpool, Manchester City, Spurs and Man United caused them a lot of problems. But at home to Wolves and West Ham recently, they did show signs of improvement. Can they muster a few clean sheets? I reckon 2 from 5 is a distinct possibility. And Collins or Pinnock can grab a goal in any game. Collins' expected goals of 0.16 per 90 edges Pinnock at 0.10, but they both carry a decent threat. I can entirely see why you might be tempted to bring one of them in, especially if you haven't used your wildcard yet and have that lined up to use shortly after game week 13 when their good fixture run ends. On the whole, of the cheap defenders, Ait-Nouri is really the one attracting most interest, and I can see why. His great fixture run extends further than all of the others, and that's the reason I'm most keen on him. For those who haven't wildcarded, Ait-Nouri is still a great option, but going for Collins, Pinnock or Mykolenko as a slightly bigger differential in the short term could also work out really well. They're all good picks as far as I'm concerned. That's all for now. Thanks again for watching, and please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. See you for the next one.